Hey, welcome to Tape, powered by the new Ram 1500 Sport, built exclusively for Canadians. First and foremost, welcome back, Rory. You were on the IR for a couple of episodes because you were buried at your desk, but that just means you're accumulating more and more knowledge to share with us today.
I hope that's the case. The question is, when I'm accumulating this new stuff, what did I lose?
That's true. It's one in, one out at this point. There's no doubt about that. The good news for us, whatever we don't know, Sean Reynolds can tell us, specifically as it pertains to the Winnipeg Jets and how that team, spoiler alert, thanks to some great goaltending, but some other things going on as well, that team has done really well to not just keep it together, but start to really climb up the standings since the start of November. So Sportsnet's Sean Reynolds will be joining us, but we have to talk about the coaching world here with the big news of first Jim Montgomery getting fired in Dallas, and then Pete DeBoer, as everyone went to great lengths to say, for hockey reasons only.
I feel like any coaching firing that is made that for that reason, it's going to be made clear that it's for a hockey reason and not anything.
You have to clarify. And the hockey reason is they've lost 5 in a row. They can't get a save, Rory. And this is a team that, despite losing Joe Pavelski in the offseason and Jonas Donskoy to the Colorado Avalanche, still had sky-high hopes for this group built around Burns, Erik Karlsson, Logan Couture, and Timo Meier. They're still kind of hanging around the wild card, but in my mind, this was clearly Doug Wilson saying, we need a jolt right now, so we're going to do this.
Yeah, and it really is telling how much of a jolt he thinks they needed when it wasn't just the head coach. It was the entire assistant staff got dismissed as well. Roy Sommer, who's been the AHL coach for them for years and years and years, gets the promotion up into the assistant role, coaching defensemen. He said he hasn't coached defensemen in quite some time, so it's going to be still a work in progress here as Bob Bugner steps in as the interim replacement behind the bench. What it really does come down to, Doug Wilson didn't upgrade the goaltending at all. Last year, San Jose's 5-on-5 save rate was the worst in the league. Martin Jones and Aaron Dell, everybody knew that was the weakness of that team, and those are the same two goalies that they bring back this year. At the same time, there are some troubling underlying numbers, like your expected goals for rate is it's middle of the pack, but towards the bottom of the league, which is indicative of, it's not just bad luck. It's not just bad goaltending. Right. Like there's something wrong with the offense here. But, as it goes for any coach, like Peter DeBoer had been the head coach there for a number of years, and eventually everybody gets fired. Eventually your message kind of runs out. I think he deserves credit, though, for when he got to San Jose, it really looked like the window had closed. And
that's what we were talking about 5 years ago.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And he was able to get them back to a Stanley Cup final, back to another conference final.
He only failed to get them past the first round once in his 4 springs there.
I mean, he's one of the more successful San Jose Sharks coaches in the team's history, probably, given the playoff success that he
went further than anyone else.
Exactly. So he does deserve credit for that. I don't think this is a sign that he's now a bad coach or something. I think Peter DeBoer lands on his feet somewhere. His former team in New Jersey looking for a head coach. Well, has an interim coach in place right now.
He has a nice little track record, too, of landing in New Jersey. Team goes to the final in his very first year. Goes to San Jose. Team goes to the final in his very first year. Now, obviously, the stars align in those situations, but you have to wonder. I mean, you're going to speculate about New Jersey, and because there was a previous fit there and because he is a good coach, and obviously he has a big junior background from the OHL, I'm sure he could switch over to being the kind of guy who's in charge of an up-and-coming team. Yeah. But you almost wonder if there's a team out there that's like, we need a finisher.
Well, you're talking about the stars aligning. I mean, maybe the Dallas Stars are that team. Rick Bowness is their interim coach now after Jim Montgomery got let go, and he has not been a head coach in quite some time. And the only time he has been a head coach was for really bad teams.
Yeah.
So, again, citing what you just said there about DeBoer's record of being able to turn those teams into playoff successes right away. That's kind of where Dallas is at right now, right? Like they almost knocked off the Blues last year in the second round. So they are right there, and they're looking like a very good team right now. So DeBoer's going to land on his feet. Whether or not it's this season, we'll find out. It's just, I think now in San Jose, as should be the case, the questions are going to start falling on the GM. Like, what are you doing to fix this goaltending issue? What are you doing to fix the depth issues that are starting to seep in here now? You know, for years, when it was Thornton and Marlowe, they were followed by a younger core. And then Couture and Pavelski were followed by a younger core. I don't know if there's an obvious younger core that's coming behind Timo Meier, Kevin Labanc. You know, they lost Jonas Donskoy, who was a really underrated loss, I think, and you're seeing it in how he's playing in Colorado. And their blue line is really thin outside of Burns and Carlson. So there's work to be done on this team. And there's a very real question if they are even a playoff team this year. They're on that bubble right now. And remember, Ottawa holds their first-round pick from the Erik Karlsson trade, so that could end up looking really bad for them. And then if you miss the playoffs and you don't have your first-round pick, you wonder about Doug Wilson's time there and what's going to come next for him.
All right, let's turn our attention now to the Dallas Stars. To get the story of what's been going on in Texas for the second straight week, we reach Sean Shapiro of The Athletic. Sean, just a nice, easygoing week for you down there?
I mean, I hate to say this, but it's the typical December for covering the Dallas Stars. I mean, it's been we went through yesterday. Tuesday now. So Tuesday's firing of Jim Montgomery was literally two weeks from the 1 year anniversary of the famous Jim Light comments from last year. So I guess it's always a busy December with the Dallas Stars.
No doubt.
And then this week, obviously, you know, this was even more surprising than the Jim Light thing because while the Jim Light thing was stunning for me in particular, the Jim Light thing, I was right directly involved with that conversation. So it's something I had kind of chance to process as it happened, and something where you saw the kind of had seen some of those comments about Jamie Benn and Tyler Seguin in the background before, just kind of some of those sentiments. But the Jim Montgomery getting fired thing completely out of nowhere, for not just me, for everyone, and still we still don't know what happened, which is the crazy thing about it. We know it was something bad. We know it was something really bad because it was something where for Stars HR to be able to say, yeah, we feel legally we can fire this guy as easily. We still don't know what happened, and that was really bad.
You know, it was a very successful tenure, you could say, for Jim Montgomery as head coach, and obviously this dismissal has nothing to do with what was going on the ice. But you know, in that vein, I'm curious, what was he like, not as a coach, but just as somebody, just as a guy that you would have talked to on a regular basis?
Well, he was great to deal with, which I think is one of the things that kind of makes this more surprising out of everything. Like, he was someone who I remember right when Jim Montgomery got hired. He got hired from Denver. He came to Dallas. Actually had lunch with him early on in his tenure here, and he was always really open to talk about hockey, life, things like that. He was very he was interesting. He was a bit short in sometimes his answers. He could have been like if you asked a question, he would speak and just answer it quickly, and that would be it. And so if you didn't know him, you would think maybe he was short with you, but no, he was something where if you got to know him a little bit, he was genuinely seemed like a very good person. I'll just put it that way. From all of my interactions with him, he was a good person. So obviously whatever happened goes against that, and I don't know what it is. So it's just kind of a weird feeling because you go from covering someone, and same thing for the Stars players, who even if they butted heads with him on something from time to time, they respected him too. So really that makes it even more stunning because no one expected this.
So Rick Bowness takes over on an interim basis at least. He hasn't run an NHL bench in 16 years. He's never been a head coach of a team that was really any good. And this team wasn't struggling. So, what can we expect from him? What style of a coach is he going to be, given that there's nothing really wrong going on with this team? I mean, I wouldn't expect he's going to change a whole heck of a lot, but how do you see him operating as the head coach?
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting because I think one thing, you can't look at the Jim Montgomery era without talking about Rick Bowness anyway, because so much of the Stars' style and identity, a lot of that goes down to what they did defensively, and Rick Bowness is a huge reason for that. And him and Jim Montgomery worked very close together to help form that. So because of that, you're not going to see many changes or anything along those lines that are drastic. I think Rick Bowness will have his own quirks and his own intricacies that he'll bring to what the Stars do, but it's not going to be a situation where he's ripping everything apart and changing everything. And I think that's one of the main reasons that the Stars went with Rick Bowness as the head coach, because they also have John Stevens on the bench, former NHL head coach. They also had Todd Nelson on the staff, who has some interim NHL coaching experience. So I think they went with Bowness kind of with that concept of someone who's going to keep the status quo and may bring his own intricacies in, but I wouldn't expect much change.
The Stars are a team with very high expectations, and we were speaking earlier on this podcast about another team with high expectations, the Sharks letting go of Peter DeBoer, and DeBoer has a history of joining teams and taking them to the final. I know we're still just working through one coaching change here, Sean, but what's your sense early on in terms of, is this going to be Bowness's show for the rest of the season, or do you think there is at least a small chance, depending on how things go, we could yet see a third coach behind the bench between now and April?
I think this is the Stars coaching staff for the rest of the season. And this is the Stars coaching staff for the rest of the season. And I think really we're looking at, this is Rick Bowness's on-the-fly job interview for the next 50 games or so to see if he's the NHL head coach for next season. I really think that's where they're going with this. I think if things go well, Rick Bowness probably loses that interim tag and becomes the head coach. If not, we have a head coaching search in the offseason. So I don't think we see another change. I think Jim Mill and I spoke the other night. He kind of made that pretty clear. And so I think we're seeing Rick Bowness' real chance here. This is the real opportunity he has to take over a team, and kind of at 64 to take a head coaching job on a pretty good team.
Yeah, great chance here for a hockey lifer who's probably never been in. I mean, as he said, or as the point has been made, he sure would have liked of it to happen under different circumstances, but a great opportunity for him, no doubt. Okay, it's been a crazy week for you, Sean. We will let you go. Yep. Come back soon, but we'll give you a couple weeks off at least here, okay?
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. You have a good one.
All right, that is Sean Shapiro of The Athletic. Make sure you check out the story he wrote on Bowness. Great piece on The Athletic where he talked to members of Bowness's family, and as I said, a hockey lifer for sure, and not the way he would draw it up, but a great chance for Bowness to show what he can do and see if he can get the Stars over the top. Okay, stick around. Still lots more to come right here on Tape to Tape. Welcome back to Tape to Tape. If you listen to this podcast, I bet you're into fantasy hockey. Don't forget to sign up for the Sportsnet fantasy pool. Just go to sportsnet.ca/RAM. It is, of course, presented by RAM. There are all kinds of cash prizes totaling $50,000 and the grand prize of a 2020 RAM 1500 Sport. Team Band-Aid, Colorado Avalanche. Man, they have
great
had
team.
Great team. Just a lot of guys who haven't been able to stay in the lineup. Cale Makar, the latest. We don't know at this moment how long he'll be out. He was getting points for people in their pools. Maybe some people looking for answers. I just cut bait with PK Subban. 18 games as of right now without a point. Last point was a goal on November 2nd. If other people were cutting PK Subban, do you think he's one of the guys who people might think about searching for in their league if they're desperate for a Makar solution?
Well, first of all, I can't, and I don't think anybody can fault you for dropping PKs. It's just so
I do believe the
crazy
numbers
to think
speak
of,
for themselves
right?
at this point.
Yeah, they do.
In a non-keeper league anyways.
He's got the name value attached to him for sure. Andrew Berkshire, our analytics writer, did a piece last Saturday looking at players who are poised for a second half breakout, in that they haven't put up points yet this season, but there's something about their underlying performance that would suggest that there's some bad luck in there, or a bad situation or something, and it will turn to some degree, maybe not fully recapturing something that they had in the past, but back to some level of relevance. And in the fantasy land, Subban is one of these guys that Berkshire highlighted. And basically he was saying he still manages the puck very well. He's got the lowest turnover rate on the Devils. His shot metrics, his scoring chance generation is similar to what it's always been. It's just that his involvement in the power play hasn't been to the same level, and so that is going to hurt him. But even still, at 5-on-5, these numbers would suggest that, and again, like, how long is PK Subban going to go without scoring?
Yeah.
There's some kind of bounce back going to come for him. And I wonder, we saw with the Chicago Blackhawks last year, they got to a certain point in the year, they weren't making the playoffs, and basically defense went out the window. And this is when Eric Gustafsson took off for that team and probably helped some people win fantasy titles in
No
their
doubt.
league. And what happened this year, they have to start from scratch, and they have to start building a defensive structure again, and Gustafsson is kind of irrelevant. Maybe you see something like that with New Jersey, because like Chicago, that started to happen after their coaching change in November. New Jersey's now made a coaching change. New Jersey's not going to be making the playoffs. They're probably going to be showcasing some of these players to trade. And how do you do that? You maybe drop the defense and try and open up the offense a little bit more, bump up some of these totals, and maybe that helps you win some games at the same time too, because these goalies aren't going to help you achieve any of that. So if things start to open up, maybe Subban has some kind of Eric Gustafsson effect in the second half, and you go up and pick him up today to fill in for Cale Makar. You're probably chasing points that aren't there, but this is more of a longer-term outlook that maybe it starts to pay off, because I can't imagine that Subban's going to go 5 points in 50 games or something like that.
No.
He's going to start scoring, and I don't think it's going to take that long for New Jersey to make that kind of a switch.
If you're looking for some bargain goaltending options as well, I finally had to give in and flip Matt Murray for Tristan Jarry after the guy set a franchise record for not letting in goals. The other guy I'd mentioned, who I actually do have in our keeper pool, Joonas Korpisalo. Mm-hmm. I was a little higher on Columbus than some people coming in.
Yeah.
And, hasn't gone super, super great, but past 11 games, he's 7-4-0 with a .915. And in a league now where, all the goaltending jobs are split, you're at least going to get some reps with this guy, I would say.
You're going to get reps. It almost seems to me like this is one where you needed to get on this ahead of this streak, and it's just bound to kind of fall off at some point. Maybe I'm wrong. I mean, he comes with a good, there was a plan for this guy. There's a reason why they didn't go chase another goalie in the offseason after they lost Bobrovsky. So maybe they see something there, but I just don't think this is a team that's going to win a lot of games, right? So if you're thinking about Korpisalo, maybe it is just a very, very short-term thing, but I still think ahead of him, you've got to have some of these tandem backups in mind that are available. And maybe even if Matt Murray hits your wire, especially if you have two other pretty solid guys there, that's a guy you can buy low on, either in trade or picking him up for free off of your wire. Now's the time to get him, because it seems like Jerry has taken that job, but it was Murray's
quick.
job.
No doubt.
Murray's lost it before, so it can flip back very, very quickly.
I'll tell you who I don't think is losing their job anytime soon. Connor Hellebuyck. He's been a monster for the Winnipeg Jets. We're going to talk to Sean Reynolds about Hellebuyck and the rest of the Jets. Things have been going well for a little while there in Winnipeg. Let's find out why by talking to Sean Reynolds on the other side of the break, right here on Tape to Tape. This segment brought to you by Subway. Subway now delivers, no joke. Time now for our overtime segment, brought to you by Subway. No joke. Subway now delivers. Joining us for overtime this week, it is Sportsnet's Sean Reynolds. He usually covers the Jets, but you've been on the Oilers beat of late. We want to talk to you about the Jets, of course, though, Sean, because you know that team inside out. How you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you guys doing?
We are doing fantastic and want to find out why, since November 1st, Winnipeg has a 13-3-2 record. Don't use the words Connor Hellebuyck yet. Tell us about everything else that has been going the right way for the Jets the past 6 weeks or so.
Well, if I can't talk about Hellebuyck, you haven't left me anything else.
We'll give you a chance to vamp on him, but what else?
Yeah, I've clearly Connor Hellebuyck has been the MVP of this team so far. But I know that a lot of the analytics point to this team, needing to rely on him too heavily, and maybe there's something to that. But I think this team went into the season and they looked at, some glaring weaknesses that they were going to have. And when you're a coaching staff, no one has a perfect roster. So you walk in and you take stock of what your strengths are and what your weaknesses are. And you find a way to mitigate your weaknesses and you find a way to highlight your strengths. And I think that's what the Jets have done really, really well. And you're talking about that point in the season where they've really clicked, once the calendar turned to November. And I think what you saw from that first month was that this team trying to figure out what it was going to have to do to be able to survive with so much defensive turnover and so much inexperience on the back end. And I think a lot of that, what you saw was a lot of team defense, a lot of the forwards holding back. And I think you've seen that reflect in some of the points. Blake Wheeler the last couple of years has been a 90-point guy, and this year he's nowhere near on that pace. But I think in a lot of cases what we're seeing is that commitment to the team defense to try and kind of survive some of their inefficiencies is what we're seeing play out here. And the other thing that you got to give this team credit for is, Connor Hellebuyck is keeping them in games, no doubt about that. But they've got 19 wins, and in 9 of those wins, they've either broken a tie or come from behind to win those games in the third period. And that tells me there's a team here that is, for a while they were white-knuckling it. They seem to be getting a little more comfortable, but they're able to hang around in games, and they're really able to turn it on when they need to. And the consistency at which they're able to do that has always been what impresses me. Like, if you think back to that game against the Stars a couple games back, they come back from a 2-0 deficit, tie that game. They end up losing it in overtime. But that's a loss that you can feel okay about. Right before that, they play the Los Angeles Kings. They lose 2-1, but they're able to generate a perfect scoring opportunity at the end of the third period. And Mark Scheifele gets robbed by Jack Campbell in that situation. But you can walk away from that game having lost and feel like, you know what, we were that close. And what this team hasn't had since you're talking about back in November, they haven't had those demoralizing losses that teams on a streak have that kind of break things down. And we've all seen these teams go on long streaks, and then when those streaks end, they kind of dip for a bit. Well, the Jets have done a really good job. They haven't lost back-to-back games since way back in mid-October. What they do is they lose and they get right back on the horse, and they have a really good effort their next game. And if you're not stacking losses one on top of the other, you're not falling out of the playoff picture.
So much change with this team in the defense, in the line combos and everything. And I don't think anything is as shocking as Patrik Laine having 11 more assists than he has goals to this point. He even said yesterday, matter-of-factly, I thought it was funny, he said, that's kind of weird. And these aren't just, he's not just lucking into these. A lot of these are primary assists in all situations. I'll just give you a stat here. I was looking up, I highlighted him in the newsletter today. Primary assists per 60 minutes played. In his career, the last 3 years, Patrik Laine ranked 141st, 209th, and 114th. And right now he ranks 20th in the NHL. So my question is that just because he's playing on the top line with a couple other guys who can score goals, Mark Scheifele and Kyle Connor, at a rate better than who he was playing with on the second line before? Or is something actually changing in his game where he's looking to make a pass a little bit more than he used to?
So it's partly that, because he plays with two guys who are, you've got 230 goal scorers on your line. Yeah, why not pass it to them? But he'll play it off, and he'll talk a little bit about what he did in the offseason and, the stuff that he worked on in his game. But I get the sense that he hasn't talked about it much, but that Patrik Laine went into the offseason, was coming out and had something to prove. Because we've all talked about him being a one-trick pony, and it looked like that trick kind of dried up at the end of last season. And he took a lot of heat in the city of Winnipeg from the fan base, more than I would have thought a player who was a 3-time 30 goal scorer, by the age of 20, more than he probably deserved. But I think that there was, he wanted to get better on the boards. He wanted to get better at helping to control the puck. He's been really, really good at forechecking so far this year, turning over pucks and then taking those pucks and getting them to great areas. This guy's a good passer. To the point that I was talking about earlier, if you go back to that game against the Dallas Stars, that they come back and tie that game, they tied because there's a scrum on the boards and they get that puck out, and Patrik Laine is waiting on the outside of the scrum. And as soon as he gets it, it's a gorgeous pass right to the slot, no look, where Mark Scheifele is there, and he buries the game winner. Like, that's a guy who knows how to pass the puck. And so I do think there's an element to, this is the first year in his previous 3 years, he's had more goals than assists. So this year, I think he's gone out to prove something. I think he's, thinking along the mindset of, how do I expand my game? How do I get better? I've already proven I know how to score. Well, if I know how to get assists as well, in the long run, it's going to make me a better player. And he's hovering around that point per game pace because of that. So I think it's both. If you've got two players on your line who can score like that, there's just going to be scenarios where it makes sense to pass the puck more often. But I think there's a definite intent by Patrik Laine this year to become a more well-rounded player. And you got to be happy if you're on that Winnipeg Jets team that he's gone out with that goal and has been able to achieve it the way he has.
Speaking of something to prove, did you get the sense with Hellebuyck that he had a small chip coming into this year? 2 years ago, he's a runner-up for the Vezina. He was absolutely fine last year, just wasn't up to that level that he had been the previous year. By the same token, I keep going back to early in the year. At the beginning of the year, he started game one. They go back-to-back. So Brossoit gets the start in the second of back-to-backs, and then the third game after a break, we see the backup again. And it seemed like that was a little bit of a message to Hellebuyck right out of the hop, and they were giving up a bunch of goals on that trip through New York and New Jersey. But man, since then, he's just snapped right into place. Did you have a sense that he came into this year feeling like he really wanted to show he was that guy who just about won the Vezina?
Yeah, I think so. And to be honest, I think you just touched on a really important moment. That first game of the season, he got lit up a little bit, and he really, again, the fan base really kind of went at him that game. And we like to say, or sometimes these guys say that they don't hear this kind of stuff, but I know from a conversation with Connor that I had recently, I talked about a specific tweet, and he'd read that tweet. So these guys, he's checking this stuff, and so he knows what was being said. And then Lauren Brossoit made a really strong push last season and started off the season like he was going to continue doing that. So I do think that moment there was talk about, potentially being, well, there was the radio stations in Winnipeg were talking about there being a goaltending controversy. Yep. And so I do think in that moment, Connor Hellebuyck was thinking beyond the work he put in the off season. He went in with a chip on his shoulder. He had something to prove. And boy, has he ever done it. To the point you made earlier, and we were joking about it, but this team really is not where it is without Connor Hellebuyck. They give up a lot of high quality chances, and he's there. I think these guys give up a breakaway a game. That must be the average. If they don't actually give up a breakaway in every single game, it happens over and over, and he's not getting scored on that often. And a couple of games ago, the first 4 shots of the game that the Ducks had, I was talking to him about it. Okay, the Jets held them to 4 shots, and I think the shots were 8 or 9-4, something like that. But all 4 of those shots were within the hash marks and right in front of the net with no one between those players and Connor Hellebuyck. So he's been really good at stopping those high pressure situations. But what he will tell you, what the team will tell you, is they know that he's good at that this year. So they'd rather allow those one-on-one chances that are in tight that look very dangerous than overreact, try to stop that chance, and then have the pass go right where they came from. And now it's a tap in at the side of the net. You don't see a lot of those from this Winnipeg Jets team this year. They do a good job of protecting the perimeter outside of that high quality chance. and they do a fairly good job of cleaning up the play afterwards. So it's one of those things where I think they know they're going to have to pick their poison, and right now the poison that they're picking are these one-on-one battles between Hellebuyck and another player. But what they are not doing is allowing those secondary chances when your goaltender is just out of it and doesn't have that chance.
Is this the best coaching job Paul Maurice has done with this team so far?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I think it's a very impressive job. I think he's done phenomenal coaching since the day that he got here. I mean, if you look at the early years when they weren't succeeding, the one thing you really have to give Paul Maurice credit for is all the prospects, all these high-level guys, the Patrik Laines, the Kyle Connors, the Nick Ehlers, even the Mark Scheifele's, even to a degree Blake Wheeler, under the watch of Paul Maurice, they've all taken their game to a higher level. And if you want to find a coach who's going to maximize players with talent, he has been that in Winnipeg in the bad times. Then, he takes them from a non-playoff team to a deep run to the Western Conference Final. I mean, it seems like they got caught by a team that a lot of teams got caught by. Had they not, you never know what could have happened. I mean, I think the only kind of case that you can point at to which he didn't seem to get the best out of his team was last season. And that's a tough one because I think there was a real opportunity for the Jets to take it all last season. But you cannot point to too many scenarios of a defense being gutted the way that this defense was being gutted, being patched back together, through the waiver wire and, minimum paid players and rookies and come out the way that this team has come out and doing what they're doing so far. You look at that roster, and if you watch the Jets, the one thing you will take away from it is they are getting maximum effort out of everybody on that roster. And if you are getting maximum effort, maybe you don't have the right game plan, maybe you don't have, the puck bouncing your way, but if you're getting maximum effort out of whoever you have on your lineup, you're going to give your team a chance, and they've capitalized on that chance so far.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like this season could have slid off the rails in any number of ways for Winnipeg, and there are certainly a couple people, Maurice and Hellebuyck, maybe at the front of the line, doing yeoman's work, keeping them on the straight and narrow, and in the thick of it at the top of that division. All right, well, thanks very much for joining us, Sean. It's been illuminating as always. We'll let you get back to your new beat, I guess, for the time being, and we'll see you soon back in Manitoba.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me, guys.
All right, that is Sean Reynolds of Sportsnet. Rory, boy, I tell you, at 6-7, that was the Jets' record at the end of October.
Yeah,
could have gone the wrong way fast, and what a run they've been on here the past 6 weeks.
I mentioned the newsletter in one of those questions, and I remember the November 7th NHL newsletter. We did a Canadian team power rankings, kind of how they're doing, what's their outlook and everything. And Winnipeg at the time ranked 6th out of the 7 teams, and I did it again today, Thursday.
Number one.
They're number one. You cited the record since November 1st. I cited the record in that note since November 7th, the last time I did those power rankings, and it was 11-3-1, which is far better than anybody else. The rest of of all the 7 Canadian teams from November 7th to today, only 2 of them have won more than half of their games played. Calgary and Winnipeg. Calgary, all the tumult they've just been through. And
just a quick aside, it's funny to line Calgary's record up with Edmonton's now and think of how we've been thinking of the Oilers and how we've been thinking of the Flames in a crazy season, and they're basically now almost the same.
Yeah.
We'll get to that in a future podcast, I'm sure.
Yeah. Now, I don't think Winnipeg is this good, although they do have right now the 3rd best goal differential in the Western Conference.
And it's not like this is some goalie out of the blue who's playing way over his head. Like, would you expect things to fall off? Maybe, but Connor Hellebuyck has not necessarily been a top flight goalie for a long time, but was always tracking that and became that. Yeah. And I'm just saying he's one of those guys you believe could carry on at a very high level through the next 5 months.
I have to say, so we've done one of them, we want to do it weekly on sportsnet.ca every Sunday, a kind of 3 questions with myself and a couple of our staff writers. And one of the questions last week was which individual performance has impressed you most so far this season. I had to put Hellebuyck, not just because he has been putting up these great numbers, but because I myself was very low on him coming into this year, because I think I talked about it on this podcast. His high danger save percentages historically have not been good, like comparative to Jake Allen. And Winnipeg just never was a team that gave up a lot of those opportunities. And my thinking was they're going to give up a lot more of those this year, and he's going to be exposed. And they have given up quite a few more of those. I think they've given up the third most in the league. And even in this good stretch, they're still the fifth worst team at it. They give up a lot of those. And Sean referenced all the breakaways they give up and everything. But Hellebuyck's high danger save percentage this year is top 3 or 4 right now in the league. Yeah. So, I mean, who saw that kind of performance coming from the guy? So, whether or not this is something that's sustainable over the full season remains to be seen, because he does have these very legitimate questions about that in his past. But again, he has been a Vezina finalist, and he's showed it pretty solidly here for getting close to half of a season. So it's time to start buying into this team. I don't think they're going to challenge for the division title in the regular season or anything like that. I would guess they're probably more likely a wild card team. I still think Dallas is a team to watch out for, but I don't see them falling out of the playoffs. I don't see them going into a kind of a rut that we've seen Edmonton and Vancouver, even Calgary for a stretch, kind of slip into. I don't really see this team giving that up. For all their defensive liabilities, they still have such a strong forward unit that can provide enough offense that can push you through a lot of things. And if Hellebuyck's going to stay at anything close to this level, that takes them to a different point.
Great job by the Jets. Great job by the Shawns. Thanks so much to Sean Shapiro for joining us earlier, and to Sean Reynolds to talk Jets. Great job by Rory. As always, if you want to follow Rory on Twitter, check him out at Rory Boylan. Find me at Dixon on Sports. Make sure you are subscribing to that sportsnet.ca newsletter. Get it right into your inbox. A couple weeks of Christmas, Rory. It means it's almost World Junior time. I think the plan right now, maybe bring on the guru himself, Sam Cosentino. We have to tee up that always exciting time of year. So make sure you check back next week for more glass rattling hockey action on Tape to Tape.